Welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast, your home for weekly information and inspiration to help you get the graduate job of your dreams.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Graduate Job Podcast with your host, James Curran. The Graduate Job Podcast is your weekly home for all things related to helping you on your journey to finding that amazing job. Each week I bring together the best minds in the industry, speaking to leading authors, entrepreneurs, coaches and bloggers who bring decades of experience into a bite-sized weekly 30-minute show. Put simply, this is the show I wish I had a decade ago when I graduated. This week I speak with former graduate recruiter turned author and career coach Matt Hearnden. As a former graduate recruiter, Matt has been freed from the shackles of corporate life, and as such he is now able to spill the beans on what it's really like to have to wade through thousands of online applications and conduct hundreds of telephone interviews in assessment centres. Matt doesn't hold back and shares with us the secrets of exactly what you need to do to get that graduate job, including great advice on why you're probably getting rejected on the online application stage and the simple tricks to get a yes from the telephone interview. If you're thinking of applying to a large graduate scheme, then this is a must-listen show for you. As always, links to all we discuss and a full transcript are available in the show notes at graduatejobpodcast.com/secrets. But without further ado, let's jump straight in with episode 19. Hello and welcome to the 19th edition of the Graduate Job Podcast. Really pleased today to be speaking to Matt Hearnden. Matt is a former graduate recruiter who was working for one of the UK's largest companies, but who left it all behind to become a writer, author and a student and graduate coach. Now that Matt is no longer working for the man, we're going to explore some of the secrets of graduate recruitment that aren't normally revealed. Matt, a very warm welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast.
Hello, James. I love that intro. That was cool. I think I might get people to introduce me wherever I go now because I enjoyed that a lot.
So I've given our listeners a very brief introduction, but before we plough on, would you like to introduce yourself in a little more detail and tell us how you became a student and graduate coach and a writer?
Absolutely, yeah. So, hello everyone. My name's Matt, and I have, as James said, I've spent the last 4 years working at one of the UK's biggest company in graduate recruitment, and I've also worked in the graduate attraction arena. So, how do we get the best grads to want to join the company, and also the development arena. So when they get to the company, what do we do with them? How do we make them grow? And, graduates certainly have an appetite to grow and to learn. So that's been very interesting. So really, I've wanted to go off and do my own thing, like you said, a writer, an author, student and graduate coach for a couple of years now, and my company offered voluntary redundancy recently, so I thought, wow, that's an amazing opportunity. At the time, my parents and other people in my life probably weren't as excited as I was, but for me, this was just the best opportunity to finally start to pursue what I'd really wanted. And, I'd started to do some of the stuff while I was at my old job, but now, all of a sudden I'd have 8, 9, 10 hours more a day to go after that stuff, and I'd have some money to tie me over while I could hopefully build it up. And you know what, I think probably the most important thing I can say about that decision, and we'll talk about this no doubt in the rest of the interview as well, is that I wouldn't have been able to make that decision if I didn't know what I wanted. And I think the only reason I knew what I wanted is because I had found out, admitted, fine line maybe, but I'd started being who I really was. Really I've done that over the last few years, started being the real me. And that's another reason why I want to be, want to continue to be a coach for students and graduates, because I just think there's there's a couple of things I hear often, and one is, oh, I don't really like the job I'm doing, and the other one is, I don't know what I want to do. And I think those aren't the problems, those are the symptoms. And I think the problem lies within these, they don't really know what's important to them, and that's why they don't know exactly what they want to do. So that's, and because I have found out what's important to me, hence why I'm able to make this decision I've made, and loving the decision I've made, and and now I want to help other people doing that, and that's along the lines with the writing as well. They're all stories, which are all metaphors, which hopefully people can read and take something from, and again, be who they are. So I think that's the kind of the motivation behind why I do what I'm doing.
Excellent. And it'd be great to delve into exactly how you came to the realization of what it is that you want to do, because it's something that we've covered in previous episodes. The question of what do I do now that I've graduated, and there's so much choice, and where do I go? And we've also guests have talked about the importance of knowing what your values are and what you want to do as a person, and how that can then help you with your job search. So it'd be great to cover that later on. But I was thinking maybe if we start off and just pick your brains as a former graduate recruiter with what exactly it was like to be on the other side of the fence, and to get some insights from you about what makes a great application. So starting off at the beginning, what was your role as a graduate recruiter, and what stage would you really first come in contact with the candidates?
So when I was in the role of a recruiter, the first stage I come into contact was the application form. So some companies, you send your CV in, but I think most these days it's an application form, and you have to answer questions such as why this company, and what would you bring to the role, and tell us what you know about this company. So that would be the first place I'd come into contact with them.
So when you first came across the applications, was it in your role to actually go through them? Because we spoke last week to Brian Sinclair from Ernst & Young, and he mentioned how they got 25,000 applications for their places. And I was just, how do you begin to start going through 25,000 applications and putting them into the yes and no pile? What would you be looking for initially when an online application came across your path?
Yeah, so for me, I think it's very easy to apply for loads of graduate schemes and be quite generic about them. So let's take the kind of retailers as an example. So you got Tesco, Asda, Sainsbury's, Morrison's, and Lidl and Aldi. To be honest, a lot of the applications I would see would be very generic. So they'd say, I want to work for a big retailer, or an international retailer, because I know I could learn a lot, and I could grow, and I could do this. It's just boring. I'm here to tell you the truth. That it's just boring, and more importantly, that whether you care or not, that tells the employer that you don't really care about working there, because you're just being generic. So if you want to be, for me, the ones that stood out were the ones that were very specific, because the first question is often why this company? Whatever company it is, why do you want to work here? Or tell us about this company. It's the same question essentially. And I just see so many generic answers, and I just think, well, they don't really want to work here. They've probably fired off, 100 different applications. And I guess what frustrated me was it's very easy to be specific. And when I say that, you have to put the effort into researching a company, but that's all you have to do. So, for example, if you just go onto Google and go onto the news tab and type in a company, whatever company it is, but there's going to be loads of articles about that company, and there's going to be loads of articles about what's going on currently, what's happened previously. So let's take Tesco as an example. They've been in the news a lot lately for not perhaps all the best reasons, but there's all sorts you could pick out there. So if someone's going to say to me, I want to work at Tesco because they're a big retailer and they're international, and they've got 3,000 stores in the UK and the scale and all that stuff, anyone could find that out in about 10 seconds, and everyone probably knows that anyway, because Tesco is such a big brand. So find out about the other stuff. So find out about the fact, why did we pilot Dave Lewis in early? Why did they pilot the new CFO in early. You know, the 263 whatever it was £1 million accounting scandal. The now the 6.4 billion loss, and it's all publicised. But then it's talk about that, but then also talk about what opportunity that gives you. So yes, all of that stuff, but then what does that actually mean? So you could say, well, because all this stuff happens, what that means for me is I'm a graduate who loves a challenge, and I can see that actually helping to turn around one of the biggest businesses in the world, one of, if not the maybe biggest businesses in the UK, that excites me. And then you're being specific about it. That is exactly the kind of answer that I'd look for. So yes, you have to put some effort into researching it, but that's essentially all you have to do. And to be honest, it baffles me how little I saw that. It was a lot of them were very generic, and so that's why, you know, the more you can research, the more you can be specific, the more you will stand out. You will absolutely stand out, and you know, the only point of the application is to just get to the next stage. And, you know, if people see that as the first thing they see, that primes them, if nothing else, to think, oh, this person is good, and this person has put effort in, and they care. They actually want to join this company. They don't want to join a retailer. They want to join Tesco, or they want to join Asda or Morrison's. So I think, yeah, if you're specific, you will stand out.
Completely agree, and that was definitely one of the things that was really easy to pick out when I saw applications. Was you can really easily see where people have just copy and pasted and just changed the name of, you know, I really want to work for X because you have excellent development scheme, and you know, it's a top place to work. And you think, oh, you know, they've done, as you mentioned, they've got in their head that they wanted to apply to 5 or 10 companies, and it's been the easiest research they've done, and just cut and pasted it in, and it just doesn't really make them stand out, like you mentioned.
Not at all. And I think, sorry, I'm just something else coming to my head as well, is either basically find people who work there. So either through your friends, or through, you know, maybe your parents or their friends, or even just on LinkedIn, find people who work there and ask them about what's going on. Or you find graduates who work there and ask. So if you look online and you see, oh, this place has a great development program, you know, speak to the graduates about it. What exactly do you do in the development program? You know, get a list of all the courses, and then you could even say, oh, you know, these core, you know, whatever it is, like presentation skills or influencing skills, and I'm really interested in those because, like, how impressive would that be if they've said, oh, I've spoken to all these people, and actually they've told me that this is a great thing about the training, and that's what really excites me because I love to learn and I love to, you know. So if you're going to say, like, I love to learn and grow, like, where's the research behind it? Find more stuff out. Sorry, that just came into my head, so I wanted to.
It's a really good point. And again, it's one that's really easy to do. You know, if you go to your career service, they've got a list of alumni and where they are and which companies they work for.
Yeah, there you go.
9 out of 10 times, if you email them and go, hey, I'm from your university, I'm really interested, or I've got an interview with, you know, company X, could you spend 10 minutes chatting about it with me? They'll say yes. Or if you get in touch with people on Twitter or LinkedIn, you know, all these people will say yes. You just have to have the confidence to go out there and actually just ask them for their help.
And you got to decide what's more important, you know, being scared to ask them or getting what you want. Because when you phrase the question like that, it's a pretty simple answer, I think.
Completely. And again, if when you're having the interview or you've got on the application and you get asked a question, which you will, you know, why do you want to work here? And you go, well, I spoke with Barry, who's been working for yourself for 3 years, and he talked about the great things with X, Y, and Z. Immediately, you're just going to be head and shoulders above everybody else who said, well, I looked in the Guardian book of top 100 recruiters, and you came number 42, which is great. So
yeah, exactly, because everyone knows that. So yeah, you're exactly right. Be specific.
And how much of a spelling and grammar Nazi were you when it came to online applications? Was there any margin for error?
Oh boy, you know, as someone who writes, I do, you know, I'm pretty hot on that stuff. I'm not going to lie. I did try to not be as harsh as I perhaps would have been, but again, I think for me, it just shows that you could have easily checked that. Like, you could have easily pasted it into Word, Microsoft Word, and, you know, corrected stuff. You could have easily got a friend to read over it, or your parents or brother or sister or whatever. And so, depends on how good the answer is. If it was an amazing answer and there was like a couple of mistakes, maybe I'd think, okay, well, I can maybe let that slide. But I just think that really there is no excuse for that. There's a lot of ways, like I said, Microsoft Word, get someone to check it. There's just a lot of ways you can get around that. So I think if you really care, you probably would make sure that you'd done a great job with that.
I echo one of our previous guests, Sarah Stimson, who looks after a really good PR internship scheme, which gets thousands of applications for places. And she said, if she finds one single punctuation mistake or a spelling mistake, it's in the bin, because it just shows that if you can't be bothered to get it right for the application, then what's it going to be like when you're working? It's just a symptom of laziness and a lack of care.
Yeah, that's a good point. Very good point.
So, off the top of your head, any ideas how, from the number of applications that you get, how many people would get whittled away at the online application stage?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I think I would say from when I was doing it, anywhere between 60 and 70%, I would say. Maybe even more than that, to be honest. Maybe 70% is more accurate, just because of that reason, because, well, more because of the specific reason. But I think I could probably count on both my hands, really, the exceptional ones that I've seen. And I'm often surprised at how unspecific some of them are. It just baffles me, like I said. But so yeah, I think a lot of them fall out. They get binned from the process there, which is a significant amount. But like I said, I can count the exceptional ones really on my hand, I would say.
A high percentage, but as when you think that they're going through to the next stage where it requires a lot of time and input from the company, such as interviews, etc., you can understand why you'd get rid of people at this stage.
Exactly, and I think that's important for the students and graduates listening to understand, is that people especially in recruitment jobs anyway, but they rarely have the luxury of time. So probably as soon as they can feel like they can get rid of an application, they will. And that's not to demotivate anyone. That's just to say, well, if you put in a great application, they will be happy. They will think, oh, finally, like a good one. So rather than demotivate it, let it spur you on and think, oh, actually, yeah, if I just do these things, then I will have a great application. They will put me through to the next stage.
So what was the next stage after the online application?
So the next stage usually is online tests. So, like the psychometric tests, numerical, verbal reasoning, maybe like a situational judgment test, which is, they give you a situation, you have to list, there's maybe 3 or 4 or 5 options, and you have to list in order kind of, which ones you would do and which ones you wouldn't.
And what percentage do you think of people cheated on the online test? Since we're being honest.
Yeah, that's a great question. I really don't know, but what I can say is most companies I know, probably maybe all companies I know, don't ask you to do them again. So
they don't?
It would be, yeah, they don't. So it would be easy to get away with it. And of course, I'm not saying you should do that, but I am just saying that I think probably a greater percentage than we would like to think cheat on those tests.
That's interesting. So last week I spoke with Brian Sinclair and asked the same question, but not as honestly as that. And he diplomatically said that they retest if you get through to the assessment centre, they make you do a retest. Right. I think he described it to make sure there weren't any flukes or outliers. And I know the previous company I worked for, they did the retest at the assessment centre, yeah, and they looked for. It was surprising the number of people who would go from the top percentage quartile to suddenly being down near the bottom.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think that probably says it all, to be honest. I think, Yeah, I think so. The companies I've worked for haven't done any retest, and really, it's just, I'd love, and I don't have necessarily the answer off the top of my head, but I would love to see there just been a different way to recruit people, because I think ultimately it's just a tool for screening people out, because companies get so many applications. Like you said, Ernst & Young get 25,000. The company I worked for got a similar amount to that. So it's kind of just a way of thinking, oh well, we can just filter these people out. And I know some companies like Google, like my friend got a job at Google recently, and they don't necessarily run any graduate programs as such. Like, I know they do like some internships, but like the way he was recruited was just, he had 5 interviews with 5 different people, and obviously that you could argue that would be take a lot of resource on the side of the company, but maybe there's a reason they're one of the highest rated companies to work for in the world, if not the highest rated one. And I think 5 different people interviewing you get a sense of who people are then, rather than how good they are at maths, which matters in some jobs, but certainly not most jobs.
And following the online testing, would it go through to a telephone interview, or would it be face-to-face interview or Skype interview?
Yeah, telephone interview. So I know some places do like video interviews now, but the company I worked for did telephone interviews, and I think a lot of places still do that as well. So.
What will you be looking for at the telephone interview stage?
So often they would be competency-based interviews, and what that means, for anyone who doesn't know who's listening, is it means they'll ask questions like, tell me about a time when you led a team, or tell me about a time you worked in a group, or tell me about a time you showed resilience, or it's all things like that, so it's all examples of behaviors that you've done or you've given. And for me, what I would certainly be looking for the person to be, first of all, like enthusiastic, and it's okay to like be a bit nervous, like, I get it, but harsh or not, like the amount of enthusiasm you have and kind of passion that you can sense in someone, it shows that they want the job, it shows that they care, that this is going to go well. So I think, do you know what, actually, what's really interesting is often the beginning of the conversation is very one-sided. So, I will have interviewed someone, or, I heard the recruiters interviewing people, and it would often be, say I was in front, they'd be like, oh, hi, is that Matt? Are you ready for your telephone interview? And they'll be like, yeah. And it's like, oh, how are you doing? And they're like, oh, yeah, I'm good, thanks. And it seems as if the people being interviewed, the students and the grads are like scared to have that real conversation at the beginning, but that's going to work in your favor to, ask them how they are. Be like, oh, hey, how are you? Yeah, how's your day going? Like, that's totally okay. I think what stops them is that they are, fine if they're nervous and, about it. And like I said, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's okay to like have a conversation. There's still a person on the end of the line. It's still going to be someone like me, or someone like you, or someone like them. So I think that's okay, first of all. And I think, again, what I'd be looking for is a clear passion for the company. And you can show that, the application form is sometimes hard to get across because it's just words on a screen, and it's not, your voice or your face. But I think in a telephone interview, it's the first time they hear you, and, you've got a real chance there to show how passionate you are about the company. And again, how much research have you done about the company? Have you been bothered to do extra research compared to your application form? Because all of a sudden you've got a chance to say more. In the application form, it's probably like, you get like a couple of 100 words, which really is not much at all. So all of a sudden now you've got time to say a lot more. So how much extra research have you done? And then one of the biggest things I'd be looking for, which again people I think are afraid to admit, is with the competency questions. So, tell me about a time you led a team, for example. Like, it's totally okay for it to be an example that maybe didn't go the way you wanted, but that you learned from it. So I think the ability to learn from things and be, resilient about that and think, well, and actually the outcome maybe wasn't what I wanted, but oh my God, I learned so much and this is what I learned. Like that's brilliant because, a lot of the time, just in life generally, but like we mess up, like we make mistakes. I certainly do. Let me just speak for me. I mess up. I make mistakes. I do things that I think, oh yeah, and then I learn from it, and I think, oh, that was messed up, and I did that wrong. But actually, what I learned was this, and I just think that's extremely important. And I've had telephone interviews before when I've asked people what they've learned, and they can't articulate it, and either because they're not self-aware or because they're kind of scared to, because they kind of think, oh well, I need to not appear vulnerable at all. I need to appear like I've got everything together and I'm strong in every single part of my life. Well, you're not. Like, we're all people again, so it's okay to talk about those examples and say, but what I learned is this, and I have rejected people because they couldn't articulate what they learned, because how the companies recruit grads usually to be their future leaders, their senior managers, their directors, the CEO maybe. And if you can't learn, then that's never going to happen. Like those people won't get there. So I have rejected people based on that, and I know other people have as well. So I think that's definitely one of the most important things that I would certainly look for. And I know, other people in the company and outside the company also would definitely look for.
Yeah. I found often with competency questions, if people had an idea of what the competency was going to be, they come in with such pre-canned answers, and almost, you ask them about, say, a time you've worked in a team, and they're like, team, okay, my team answer. Okay. And they, don't stop for breath, just like plow on straight through it. And then if you try and ask a question around the side of it, such as, what did you learn? And it's not part of their pre-canned answer, they can immediately throw them.
It's so true. Yeah, you're so right. And then, you don't want to be thrown, because then that will just potentially throw you off for the rest of the interview. So, yeah, I think that's a really good point as well about, all these these answers that you've planned. It's okay to have like examples, obviously, but I would say if you're going to have examples, make sure you know what you learned from that example, because that question will be asked.
That's a really good point. And also, come back to what you said with telephone interviews generally. Put yourself in the position of the recruiter, thinking that they've probably been given a list of 10 people to ring up that day and to interview. And if you're the one of the 10 they speak to that's excited, that wants to speak to them, that's asking them questions, that's, it sounds really positive and wants to be there, then you're going to stand out.
Absolutely. And do you know what? That's such a great point, because that day, you as a student or graduate probably only have one telephone interview. The recruiter is probably going to have like 10. So they want to have fun. Like, they want to have a good conversation. So it's okay to, because like I said, no one else is probably going to do it. So it's okay to be like, oh yeah, how are you doing? How many interviews have you had today? Oh, be curious about them, because I think for me, certainly, I've been so bored on some of my telephone interviews, and I'm like, oh God, like it's really hard to listen. But then you get someone who is like really kind of enthusiastic and talks to you. It's a good conversation to have, and then rightly or wrongly, you feel good about that person.
And moving on then from the telephone interview, was there a stage in between that and the assessment centre, or would it be straight through to the assessment centre?
So where I most recently worked, that was it. So if you got through that, then you got invited to an assessment centre. But I think some companies might have like a face-to-face interview before that as well. But I think most assessment centres include an interview now. So I would be, I think the assessment centre after the telephone interview would probably be the most common way.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of the assessment centre itself, what key things in your experience did people struggle with? Which aspects?
I think nerves, and it's a shame because some people are great, or you can see they're great, but their nerves are just totally getting in the way of their performance. And I think, I know I said before it's okay to be nervous, but ultimately you don't want to be feeling nervous all the time. So I think one of the best things that this is what I would do now if I was going to an assessment centre. First of all, I would drive there the day before, so I know where I was going, and so, I knew what I was doing, and so I didn't have to worry about that. But I would certainly, if it starts at 9, I would get there at 8, just so I knew I was there. So then that's one less thing to worry about. But I think most importantly, when I met the other candidates and the other assessors, I would be intensely curious, because asking questions is an amazing way to get over having nerves, because then you don't have to speak. You can just ask that, if there's 1,000 questions you could ask. So, if the assessors, and I used to be an assessor, so, it's just people like me that assess, people that are fun, hopefully, and are just, normal people. And, I would certainly, like I said, there's loads of questions you can ask them. You can, how long have you worked for so-and-so? What do you like best about your job? What's the most challenging thing about it? There's all sorts of questions you can ask. And I think that's such a good way to get rid of nerves, because as you realise they're just people, you kind of think, oh, well, they're just people. And I think that, they'll probably say at assessment centres, oh, you're interviewing us as much as we're interviewing you. And I don't know if anyone ever believes that, but I think the more human you see everyone there, the more you realise it's true, and the more you think, well, yeah, like I've chosen to come to this assessment centre, but I might not work here. I might actually not like the people here, or I might love the people here and definitely want to work here. And I just think it helps you be better in that mind frame, rather than just thinking, oh my God, I'm on show and I'm being judged the whole time. And also, just quickly on that as well, is that you are being judged the whole time, but you're being judged the whole time no matter what. So if you're trying to be someone you're not, if you're trying to impress rather than just being yourself, you're still being judged, and people still might not like that. So I think that's one of the best arguments I have for just being you.
That's right. Different companies have different ways of looking at assessment centres. I know where I worked, you say this to candidates and they wouldn't believe you, but if there was an assessment centre of 6 people and all 6 of them were great, then you'd make 6 offers. Where you were working, would that be the same, or for each assessment centre, did you have a maximum number of offers that could be made?
Yeah, no, we didn't. It was the same as your company. So yeah, if there's 10 people there and all 10 are fantastic, then yeah, we're going to take them. And again, we do say that at assessment centres, but yeah, I do think no one believes you, because they think, oh, I'm in competition with so and so, and I'm in competition with, I know it's very easy for maybe us to sit here and say, but actually, because we have done it, we do have some credibility. But you aren't in competition. Is just about how good you are, not in comparison to everyone else. As you say, if there was 10 people and all 10 of them were great, but yeah, we're going to hire them. Why wouldn't we? So yeah.
And I think that's a subtle shift in mindset, particularly when you're in the group exercises and you are working together as a group, because you would see candidates come in and almost you could see in their head that it was their chance for them to shine, but they needed to make other people look bad, as opposed to people who went in with a collaborative mindset and were, bringing other people into the conversation, asking other people questions, and just trying to solve it as a group who would stand out for good reasons.
Yeah, you're so right. That is such a good point. And the one thing that I would have loved to have seen more at assessment centres, and the one thing I rarely saw, was exactly that, was bringing other people into the conversation. So yes, everyone will make their point and things, but if someone's being quiet or they haven't had the chance to speak yet, rarely did I see, for example, if it was me and you were there, I'd be like, oh, James, what do you think about that? Or like, oh, James, you had a really good point about the last one. What do you think about this? Like, assessors will be all over that. They will love that. The assessors at my company certainly did. Like, whenever we saw someone kind of saying, oh, Matt, what did you think? Oh, yeah, James, that's a really good point. How about, what do you think about this? That is amazing to see, because that's like real leadership, not bullying your way to the front of the conversation.
And what made up the assessment centre, apart from the group exercise? What else could people expect?
So there was a one-to-one interview, and then there was a presentation in which they had about 45 minutes to prepare, and then they did a 10-minute presentation to one of the assessors, and then there was a question and answer. And then there was the group discussion. So yeah, there were only actually a few exercises. One of the great things about the assessment centres that we did was that for the interview, we did something called a 3D CV, and that meant that people could either bring in possessions they had, or they could make stuff, and we had all sorts of just incredible ones. Like we had someone make their own food packaging label that like described who they were. We had someone create a little delivery van with little boxes in the back of their attributes. I had someone who made a game, and he got me to play it, and I rolled the dice, and whatever I'd land on would be like one of his achievements or a fun fact. And it is just an amazing way to get to know someone. And what's the point about that is if you get asked to bring your CV to an assessment centre or to an interview, I'm not, maybe you bring the kind of traditional, if you want, CV as well, but how about bringing a 3D CV as well? Like, if that is going to make you stand out, they will be shocked. They will be absolutely shocked by it, I guarantee it. So I just thought of that, and I just wanted to mention that as well.
That sounds amazing. I mean, how much notice would people have to pull something like that together?
So it depends, because sometimes we'd be running an assessment centre, on a Monday, and the candidate wouldn't find out, and the candidate would have got through a telephone interview on the Thursday or Friday, so they might only have the weekend to do it. But I think one person once made the excuse that theirs wasn't. I didn't really have time to do it. Which, it's a poor excuse. So some people had shorter, some people had longer, but at the end of the day, it's how important is it to you to do this? Whatever you want to do, I think, you could do it in a weekend, basically, if you dedicate enough of your time to it. But yeah, it was an amazing kind of move by the company to do that. And it's been an amazing success, but it's like how, I think it's such a great idea. Like, I would do that now. Like, I would honestly do that, if I was to ever have a kind of another interview in that situation, or maybe a pitch to a client or something like that. Take something or make something. It brings it to life, and it shows who you are more maybe than just a bit of paper.
No, that's a brilliant point. And again, it's a common theme throughout what we've talked about is going the extra mile and doing something to make yourself stand out, whether it's with how you research the company, whether it's speaking to people who work at the company, and this is just another logical step. It's, doing something creative for the company that you're applying for. So in retail, as you mentioned, with a food packaging label, you're working for a company making, shoes, and you develop your own shoebox or whatever it is, just thinking and actually putting some creative thought into it and showing that you've taken the time, you've not just cut and pasted to 10 different companies.
Exactly. It's just such a good point. And I think, again, if they put themselves in the shoes of the employer, how impressed would they be that someone brought a 3D CV to their interview? I mean, who does that? Like, no one does that. So, yeah.
Question now for you is, I'd be interested to get your thought on it. I know when I've been on the other side of it, both good and bad, what the outcome has been. Following the assessment centre, how quickly did you let the people who got the job know and the people who didn't get the job know?
So it would, so there would be no difference in terms of if you did or didn't get the job. So it would be the same amount of time. Am I making sense? Yeah. So it would, and to be honest, it could vary from anything between a few days or like maybe even a few weeks. Usually it would be within a couple of weeks most of the time. But like we were saying before, recruiters are busy. Everyone's got stuff to do. It's not the only thing on their plate. So yeah, but there would be no difference in terms of if you did or didn't get it. You'd still find out in the same amount. We wouldn't just wait for longer for one or the other.
I guessed it would be if you got the job, you'd find out that day, and if you didn't, it would be a couple of days later.
Okay, yeah, no, we never tell anyone on the day actually. Again, because I just think recruiters are so busy running other assessment centres and telephone interviews, and they have crazy busy jobs. So yeah.
And before we move on to just explore about the leap you made from recruiting, one final question. How much scope is there, if any, for negotiating the salary for a graduate job?
That is a great question. And I think it would depend on a few things. So I think, first of all, it would depend on... Do you know what? I think one of the things it would depend on is the amount of job offers you have. So if you have been accepted to a couple of places and the salaries are different, there is... I mean, it's the kind of the old cliche, but like it doesn't hurt to ask. So, if one of them is like 30 grand and one of them's 25, you could say, well, I've been offered this one, which is 30. I do want to join you, but so is there anything you can do? And I think most places would probably say there is nothing we can do. However, I don't know that for sure. And I think there's absolutely nothing to stop you from asking, apart from, being a bit scared to ask, because I very much, even if you ask and they say no, they're not going to like rescind your job offer. I think that would be crazy, but it probably depends on the industry as well. So I've only ever worked in a couple of industries. Like, for example, I haven't worked in like the investment banking industry or something like that, and I don't know whether it would be more negotiable there. Again, it would be worth maybe speaking to people who've done it before, who've been through it before, and saying, do you think I could do that? Do you think I could negotiate? It's a really great question. Yeah, I think it'd be really great if someone did explore that. Like one of the students and grads listening, it'd be really great if they explored that and then let us know how they get on. That would be really interesting.
Certainly would. So let us know how you get on, listeners. Give us a tweet at GradJobPodcast, and look forward to hearing how you got on. So, Matt, we talked just before we started the call and also at the beginning of the call about your movement from the world of recruiting to coaching and writing. And you mentioned how you feel it's a lot more now in line with what you really want to do. How did you make that jump, and how did you come to the realization that you needed to make the move?
So, for a long time, I wondered about the question, who am I? And it really kind of circled around in my mind a lot. And one of the things I knew I liked doing was helping people. And I didn't quite know in what capacity, but I knew I liked, helping people and making people happy and things like that. I decided to go, as we briefly talked about before this, on a coaching course, to learn how to coach people, to learn how to, for them to find their own solutions. And actually, the biggest thing I learned on that course was that I needed to help myself before I could help other people, because ultimately I wasn't being who I really was. And there'd always been something in me that was kind of like, it almost felt like something was like missing, and it was never necessarily a huge issue, but it was getting bigger. I could feel it, and I could feel like I really want to sort this out. And so on that course, the way the guy runs it is amazing. Like I said, like I was saying before, but you learn how to coach people, yes, but you learn how to first of all coach yourself, and you learn how to get out of your own way, because really that is the only way you can help other people get out of their way. So basically, once I, following that course, I was a lot more comfortable with who I was, because I'd finally, I'd literally written down what my values were, what was important to me, and straight away when I did that, I could see I'm not living by them, and I wanted to, like there was no obligation, but I wanted to do that, and so that led me to, and really that's how I got into the writing. I kind of wanted to maybe set up this is a while back now, but I wanted to set up a business as like a coach or a personal coach, and through that I started to write articles because I wanted to get clients, but then actually I started to really just enjoy writing, and I would read like hundreds of articles like a week. Like, it was crazy. Like, I'd read like 10 at a time without even thinking. Like, and then I thought, well, why don't I do this? Like, what's stopping me from writing my own stuff? And, you know, as I did it more and more, I got, you know, hopefully better and better, and I got on some websites, ones like Elite Daily, Thought Catalog, Life Hack, and I started doing it more and more and getting better and better. And like I said, you know, recently it led me to, when they brought up voluntary redundancy, I knew straight away that I was going to take it. You know, I didn't apply straight away, and I chatted with my parents and my friends and stuff, but really I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And the only reason I knew I could make that decision and take the leap, and what people see as a risk, but I don't see it that way. I just see it as, I'm going to do what I love and what I really want to do. And the only reason I was able to make that decision is because what I said at the beginning of the story, because I found out, you know, / admitted, fine line, who I really was. And actually, along with that, you know, once I found out who I was, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what kind of life I wanted. Like, all the other stuff is like is above the surface, but who am I? That's in here. And for me, every single thing comes from that. So every decision I make, every you know, the paths I want to take, everything I write, you know, it comes from me, and I think I'm able to make those decisions. And what other people see as a risk, and what other people see as, oh, but how could you possibly make a decision like that? Well, I'll tell you, it's because I know who I am, and that's the most succinct way I can put it.
And when you're consistent with your values and congruent with who you are across, you know, your job and how you feel and how you interact with people, then things start to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, even things like this, like, you know, I would never have thought before that I'd be, like, you know, able to go on a podcast and talk about my experiences, and I'm loving it, James. I'm not going to lie, you know, I'm really enjoying this. So it just leads you down your own path, and you stop thinking about, oh, what does so and so want from me, or what do my parents want from me? And you know, I love my parents, like, don't get me wrong, let me make that clear, but it's my decision, you know, and I'm able to make the decision because I know what is important to me. And actually, it was really interesting because I've been working with a girl recently, and we were talking about, you know, what's your list of what's important to you, and then we were talking, you know, there's and she said happiness was at the top of her list, and I was like, this, yeah, you know, that's not a bad thing to probably have at the top of your list. And then all of a sudden she just goes, oh my God, I know why I'm not happy. Because I'm not doing this, because I'm in a job I don't like, because I'm listening to my mum all the time. And so that's why it's amazing as well, because you do this list, and then it's like a diagnostic tool. You just think, oh, well, that's at the top of my list, and I'm not doing it. So no wonder I'm not happy. You know, it breaks it down and makes it logical. And that was amazing to see, you know, that just from me being a coach and doing it with someone. That was the most recent example anyway. So yeah, that was amazing to see.
So listeners, if you've got an itch, then probably best to scratch it and see where it leads to.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And check out episode 6 with David Schindler, where he talks about values in his life and how he had a job which wasn't fundamentally fulfilling his values and the difficulties that he had as a result. And also episode 13, I think, with Jennifer Holloway, where she talks about her personal brand, just making sure that you're consistent across your personal brand, and how that will then lead you to do something that you're more happy with than what you might currently be doing.
I'm going to check those out as well. Those sound good.
Shifting gears slightly, as time is running away with us.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Before we begin to wrap up, no, don't apologise. Let's now look at some quick fire insights from yourself. What book do you recommend listeners to read?
So I'm reading an amazing book at the moment. It is called Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less. And essentially, pardon the pun, the message is basically pretty much everything is unimportant. So what is truly important in our lives, and how do we focus on that? It is an amazing book, and it's funny, James, when we were talking about this before, like you were saying, if you've got more than one book recommendation, you know, go with that. But in honour of the book, I'm only going to recommend that, and it is honestly a fantastic book, and it's really already changing the way I look. I only started reading it maybe like a couple of days ago. It started to change the way I look at things. And, it even talks about how, we glorify and praise people who say, oh, I only sleep 3 hours a night, but I still am more productive, because I probably drink 50 cans of Red Bull. And it's like, we can survive for less time, we can survive longer without food and water than we can without sleep. So sleep is important. And for some reason, it's come to the stage where, less sleep means you're successful or means you're a better person. It's just not true. So that is a myth that dispels, and it really helped me because I certainly used to think that way about sleep, and I was like, oh, but if I sleep, I could be getting more done. But since I started just sleeping, really 8 hours, what they say is the optimum, and it's what it says in the book as well is, I've been 100 times more productive. So it's a great book. I would 100% recommend it.
Thank you for that. And links to everything that Matt discusses will be in the show notes. So check out Graduate Job Podcast and you'll be able to find a link to Essentialism. Now, Matt, which internet resource do you recommend?
I recommend jamesaltucher.com. Again, we can put the link in the bio, so I won't spell it out. But he has a very interesting perspective on life and on many, many different things in life. And he's had many ups and downs in his life. And it's just really inspirational. It's really helped me through some things I've been going through, such as, going out on my own and doing my own thing and making my own money and, being my own boss, all that sort of thing. But also with a load of other stuff. And I just think he has an extraordinary perspective on life. And I think it's entertaining and educational, so I would definitely recommend that.
Listen to his podcast, and he's an interesting character. So
he's very interesting.
Delve into his website as well. And finally, what one tip can listeners implement today to help on their job hunt?
So I think I am going to go with the what's important to me list. So get out a piece of paper, on the top, write what's important to me, and just write everything down. Don't worry, stop judging yourself. Write things down that you don't really want to write down, but are there, because that is going to shape. Once you are clear on what is important to you, those are your values, that's who you are, you will know where to apply and kind of what job you want and what kind of life you want. And, we've given other tips in the rest of this podcast, so go back and listen to that. But that is the one thing that helped me the most with my life, and as a result with my career choices. So definitely that.
Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. Before we finish, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you and to read the content that you're putting out there?
Yes. So probably the best way is really for any kind of social media. So through my Twitter or on Facebook. Yeah, probably just through Twitter or Facebook is best. Or we can put my email, I guess, in the show notes as well. But really, any of those ways, whatever anyone's comfortable with. And yeah, especially with the student and graduate coach stuff, if any of it's kind of resonated, then maybe it's time to do something about it and get in touch. So hopefully people will. I'd love that.
Excellent. Matt, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Many thanks for your time today.
Thanks a lot, man. It's been great, and I'll talk to you soon.
Many thanks again to Matt. Longer episode than normal, but I hope you enjoyed it and got lots of value from it. Not often do you get the chance to hear such an honest answer from the other side of the recruitment fence. Now, the first takeaway for me, and it's an important one, is the need to be specific. As Matt said, 70% of applicants are whittled away at the online application stage, and aside from basics such as spelling mistakes, one of the key reasons is people aren't specific enough in their answers. I know it takes time to do these applications, but that's the point. It's designed to separate those who can be bothered from those who can't. You can spot an application which is just cut and pasted a mile away, and those just end up straight in the bin. If you find yourself getting rejected at the online application stage, a lack of specifics about why you want to work there could be one of the reasons. Now, if you don't have a reason, then find one. Speak to current grads, people who've done business with them, anything, but be specific about why you want to work there and have a good reason. The second takeaway is to put yourself in the recruiter's shoes at all stages of the process, from online applications to telephone interviews. As Matt said, They want you to be a good candidate and to put you through. If you're interviewing with them at the end of the day, realise that you're at the end of the list. And as Matt said, be positive, be fun, ask some questions, be yourself. Think about what is it that they want at each stage of the process and give it to them. Make it an enjoyable experience for both of you, and thus an easy decision for them to put you through. My final point is on Matt's willingness to assess his values and be honest with himself about what it is that's important to him and what he wants to be doing with his life. Look around the people you know and work with, and you probably see that honesty is all too rare. Write down your 5 core values and look at whether your current job is ticking them off. If it's not, you might need to ask yourself some difficult questions. Finally, if all this talk of going out alone and working for yourself has piqued your interest, make sure you listen next week when I'm speaking to motivational speaker Brad Burton as we cover the topic of starting your own business. Right, that is me done this week. For a full transcript of everything that we've discussed and all the links, check out the show notes at graduatejobpodcast.com/secrets. Do get in touch with us on Twitter at GradJobPodcast. And if you enjoyed what Matt had to say, give him a tweet at m_Hearnden, which is HEARNDEN. If you've enjoyed the show, please leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher Radio. And as I say each week, it's the best way, other than sharing us with your friends, to show appreciation for the podcast, and it helps massively in the rankings on iTunes. Also, if you've not already subscribed via iTunes or Stitcher Radio, you need to sort that out. It's the easiest way to make sure you get each episode delivered to you for free, and to make sure you don't miss a thing. Don't miss next week's episode where I speak with the UK's #1 motivational speaker, Brad Burton. Although, I do warn you now, it does have some fruity language. Finally, I hope you enjoyed the episode today, but more importantly, I hope you use it and apply it. See you next week.